In this video, I will go through the highlights for Biology 110 syllabus. This particular video will cover Biology 110, what's called LLC, Lecture and Lab Combined. So the course you've signed up for includes the lecture portion and the lab portion fully online. So I'm going to do what's called hit the highlights and not read every word. This document is also located on the Canvas site, and I highly recommend that you read it and or print it so that you have it handy as the semester progresses. I'm Professor Good, and this is going to include all of my information, things like my email, my office, my phone number, etc. The purpose of this particular document, the syllabus, is to provide you with information on how the course will work. As previously mentioned, this is a fully online course. That means the labs and the lecture will be performed by you at home. There's no need to come into campus to complete any of the assignments. My office hours will be held primarily virtual for your particular course. However, if you would like to meet with me in person, I have in-person office hours, or we can set up a virtual appointment. If you are going to email me questions and get a quick response, the best way to do that is to send me an email with all of the information that I need to correctly answer your questions. This includes your name, the course, Biology 110 is sufficient, and your questions that you have. I teach a variety of courses such as microbiology and anatomy and physiology. So if you just say, I have a question about the assignment, I don't know which class or which assignment, so the more information you can provide, the more I can assist you promptly. It should be noted that you must use your ICC email to email me for me to be able to correspond with you. This is a college policy. Also, since we are in an academic setting, it is important that you use complete sentences, grammar, punctuation, etc., and not as if you're texting from your phone. Biology 110 is a survey course in which we're going to look at a variety of topics. I hope that you will find something within the course interesting that is going to impact your daily life. The course level outcomes are the topics that we will cover during the course of the semester. For textbooks and technology, what you're going to need is basically a computer with internet access that's reliable. You will need a webcam that has audio, and video, by the way. Obviously, if it's a webcam, it needs video. And you will need some kind of camera to take photos of the lab portion of the course. A cell phone or some kind of device that takes photos is sufficient. You will also need to purchase a lab kit from the ICC bookstore. So sometimes students get confused about where is the actual textbook. For this course, the textbook is an e-text, meaning electronic or digital version of the text. It is going to be embedded in the Canvas site, which I will show you on another video. If you would like a loose leaf version of the textbook, like a physical copy, you can either purchase that from the ICC bookstore or directly from McGraw-Hill. The price for the textbook, the e-version, is going to be automatically included in your ICC bill. This typically is not charged to you until after the refund date. So if you don't see it before the semester begins, don't worry. It will be there usually around September in the fall and about February in the spring, about 2 weeks after the semester begins. Because we're not meeting in person, you still have due dates, but we need to make sure that you're attending and keeping up. This is not a course that you can kind of willy-nilly decide when you want to do the assignments. So you don't have to log in at any particular day or time. So I'm never going to say like Tuesday at 9 o'clock, you need to log in. However, you still have to go by the due dates. So that's part of the attendance policy. So in order to be considered attending and actively participating in the course, you have to log into Canvas at least once per week, and you need to submit your lab photos. I will go over the lab photos in detail when we discuss the lab later in a separate video. A never attender is defined as someone who never logs into the course on Canvas, doesn't complete any assignments, or doesn't contact me within the first 5 days of the semester. So you would be marked as a never attender. Now, if you're watching this, you probably are going to be an attender, so you would not qualify. A non-attender is someone that stops participating, who doesn't contact me, who basically doesn't do anything for 7 days, doesn't communicate, and I could administratively drop you from the course. I typically will email you first and say, is something going on, or is there an issue? Can I get you back on track before I do that? But if I don't get any response, then I may drop you as a non-attender. There are many types of assignments in this course, and we'll go through the details of that later in this presentation. Just a few include things like Nearpods, homeworks, quizzes, etc. But again, I'll go through that later in this document. So we're going to focus primarily on the lecture portion of the course in this particular video. So the lecture is going to be presented using something called Nearpod. It's free, and you don't have to do anything besides log into Canvas and click on the Nearpod, which you've already done because that's just through a Nearpod, and then answer the embedded questions as you go along. This is very similar to if you were going to be attending the lecture in person. In fact, when I lecture in person, I use the exact same Nearpods. It's just me speaking them versus the narrated version. So the Nearpods are narrated, so I highly recommend that you listen to them. I have created all of these. So I have created the slides, I have narrated them, I have inputted all of the videos, all of the activities and questions. So if you're listening and completing the Nearpods, I provide examples, analogies, a helpful hence. So it's going to be very, very helpful to listen to those Nearpods as the lecture material. Again, this is the same as if you were attending in person. The Nearpods also have a corresponding lecture notes that are located on Canvas, and they have blanks in them. So as you're listening to those Nearpods, you're going to fill in the blanks. And again, that's the same as if you were attending in person, which helps you actively participate in the lecture. Those notes are your main resource for the quizzes and exams. So if you print the notes or even filling in digitally the missing blanks that are in the Nearpods and you're listening along, that's what you should use to study for the quizzes and tests. The Nearpods are 5 points per chapter, and they do have due dates, basically 1 per week. And you're going to get 5 points if they're completed at 100% completion. However, I do deduct for incorrect answers. It's minus 0.1 for each incorrect answer. But please note, if you get the question incorrect on a multiple choice specifically, Nearpod actually lets you rewind, like literally move the cursor back a little bit and change your answer. So it'll show you that you missed it. It will show you the right answer. So there's no reason to get those multiple choice questions incorrect. So because you're in a lecture lab combined section, you have the lab also being done at home. You're going to use the lab kit to perform many but not all of the activities. And you're going to use the lab exercises, which are found in the lab manual, to provide you with instructions. You're going to fill in all the components in the lab exercises, do all the activities, and then you're going to submit the required photos. Again, I will discuss that in greater detail in a separate video. So I'm going to, again, kind of hit the highlights on this one. Some of your supplies that you need are located in the lab kit. However, there are a few lab exercises at the beginning of the semester that you will need to purchase some items. And I always will send you an email, or the announcements will be on Canvas to kind of give you a heads up. And these are items that we can't put in the kit because they will go bad. Things like an egg or a potato, that obviously we can't put an egg in the lab kit because by the time you use it, it would be disgusting and smelly. So there's a few things that you will have to purchase, but the majority are in your lab kit. So how I take attendance for the lab portion of the course is by you submitting your lab photos. And again, we'll discuss this in greater detail a little later. The one thing to note is that if you don't submit your lab photos, then your lesson quiz score is a 0. So the lesson quiz is both lecture and lab. It's 20 questions, typically 10 questions over the lab material and 10 questions over the lecture material. So if you got a 19 out of 20 on your quiz, but you didn't submit your lab photo, I will manually go in and change that score to a 0. So make sure that you're submitting those lab photos so that you can get credit for the lab portion of the course. Each student should submit the lab photos. It is 4 photos per lab, and you get 2 extensions. In other words, if you need extra time or you were having a rough week or you forgot, whatever that is, you can get 2 extensions on lab photos. All right, again, we're going to go through the details of the lab in a separate video, so I'm going to kind of move down to a few other things. So the lecture exams, there are a total of 5, 4 of which are unit exams. So basically multiple chapters, usually 2 to 4 chapters depending on the unit. The exams are going to be, with the exception of the final, primarily due on Tuesdays and will open the Friday before. There are 75 questions, 100 points. So each question is worth about 1.3 points per question. And they are timed 80 minutes. And I'm going to use something called Proctorio, which I'll discuss a little later, for those exams and quizzes. The best way to complete those exams is to be in a quiet space where you're free of distractions, you've got good internet, and to have previously studied your Nearpods and those lecture notes. I also will mention I use the exact same questions for the quizzes for the exams. So they are large pools for those quizzes. So a pool for, let's say, quiz 1 may have 100 questions, but you're only going to get 20. But that same pool will be then used for the exam. So it's also beneficial to go back and review your lesson quizzes to see what you missed and just to look at those questions, because you might see a question again on one of the exams. You may not use any resources for your exams or quizzes, just your brain. So make sure you've studied ahead of time, and they are going to be all timed. The final exam is comprehensive, meaning the entire semester. It only contains lecture content. All of the exams are just lecture, no lab. The final is 100 questions, 150 points. It is timed 120 minutes, and it contains information from units 1 through 4 from the lecture. If you miss an exam, meaning you're not feeling well or you had to work late, etc., then you can email me and use one of your tickets, which I'll explain, for one exam. So one ticket for one exam. So if you miss a second exam, that will then be a 0. What a ticket's going to do is provide you with a 48-hour extension. So the beginning of the semester, each student has 3 tickets already. And you can use them for homeworks, Nearpods, lesson quizzes, virtual labs, etc. The only thing you cannot use a ticket for are the photos for lab. And that will make sense when we get to the lab content. So again, let's say, you forgot to take your lesson quiz. You need to email me as soon as possible. And what that ticket is going to provide is a 48-hour extension from the original due date. So if that quiz was due on a Monday and you email me on a Tuesday and say, I forgot to take my quiz, then you've got till Wednesday to make that up at 11:59 p.m. because the quiz was originally due on a Monday. You can use one ticket per assignment, not per lesson. So a lesson may have a homework and a Nearpod and a quiz. You can't use one ticket for all of those. It needs to be one ticket per assignment. Once a quiz or exam has been completed, there's no retakes. You're like, I did really bad on exam 2. Can I redo it and use a ticket? The answer is no. So once you've done an assignment, then that grade is kind of stuck in stone, so to speak. Once you've used all 3 tickets, so kind of save them, use them up for those high point value assignments, then there's no other extensions. So if you use all your tickets in less than 2, then you don't have any more tickets the rest of the semester. You cannot use a ticket on the final exam, and you can only use 1 ticket on 1 exam. So the rest you cannot use on exams. Grading. So the only thing that I need to grade the Nearpods, and I need to grade the lab photos. So all those other scores will be entered fairly quickly upon completion on your end. It sometimes takes a little while for Canvas to sync with Connect. So you might want to refresh your computer or kind of go back in a little later and check those. I do highly recommend that you look at your grades on Canvas often. And for anything that I have to provide feedback, discussion boards or lab photos, I will actually comment. So go and look at those comments so that you are not making the same mistake over and over. The grading scale is just a straight 10-point scale, so 90, 80, 70, 60. And some other policies, if assignments aren't submitted on time, they're zeros unless you used a ticket. And again, once your 3 tickets are gone, then those would be zeros. All grades are final. So after the last day of classes, then you need to have all your points in. It's not like you can be like, I forgot to do lesson 3 quiz and it's now December. That can't happen. So that's why those extensions are only 48 hours. So you can't go back and do things from the beginning of the semester. After the last day of classes, no homework, no extra credit, no other assignments will be accepted. So there's after the grades are done, I'm not going to go in and be like, well, you were really, really close, or maybe you weren't really, really close, and you can go back and redo units 3, 4, and 5. So you need to do the things on time so that way you get your points as the semester is progressing and you know where you stand. I do round up at 0.5 or higher. So if you have an 89.5, you're going to be super excited because that's an A. However, if you have an 89.4, great job, that's a B. So I have to have kind of a cutoff, and that's at that 0.5. Academic integrity and misconduct is basically a paragraph to say, please do not cheat. Use your own brain. Don't use any extra information or resources. So exams and quizzes will have Proctorio. So what that is software that you typically don't like. I will warn you, it's a little cumbersome the first few weeks, but it's going to get better. So all the kinks or bugs get worked out usually in the first 2 lessons, and then it's not that big of a deal. Proctorio is only used for quizzes and exams. And what it's going to do, it's going to lock down your browser. It's going to record your movements. It's going to record sound. I am the only person that's going to watch this. No one else is watching it. And you do need some kind of identification. So whether that's a driver's license or your ICC student ID, but some kind of photograph that says your name on it so that I know you are the actual person taking the tests and quizzes. At the beginning of each proctored assignment, it will ask you to show your identification and do a little pre-check. So it'll basically make sure everything is in good working condition. My recommendation is to use Microsoft Edge as your browser for Proctorio. Sometimes it can be a little finicky. If you use Edge for most of your time for your browsing, then use Google Chrome. So Chrome and Edge are the 2 that work the best. But whatever you use the most, don't use that for this because it gets bogged down. It will also sometimes prompt you to clean out your cookies and cache, etc. So let's talk about proctored assignments. Again, these are exams and quizzes. You're only allowed your brain. You cannot use your phones, other people, no other resources. If you use anything, pieces of paper, etc., I will consider that cheating. Now, the final exam, I do let you use a piece of paper, but it's only for the final, and there'll be details of that as the semester progresses. If I see on the recording that someone is feeding you questions or you have notes or you have your phone handy, then I will contact you and say, I saw something that looks suspicious. You have a 0 for this assignment. I fill out what's called a student of concern form that goes to the dean of students. And then if I see it again, then you will get a 0 for the class. So the first time it's just a 0 for the assignment. Any repeated offense will be a 0 for the entire course. And I have to see your entire face, not just, from your nose down. I need to see your eyes, and I need to see that you're facing forward and not looking to the side, up and down, etc. Because that could be perceived as you have some kind of resource off to the side. Use of AI. So basically, the gist of this paragraph is you can't use any artificial intelligence for this class. Everything needs to be generated from your own brain. So where do you find assignments? They're going to be on Canvas, and you can review everything. In fact, I highly recommend that you review all of your assignments. For quizzes and exams, you can only review your answers 1 hour after the due date. So if it's due on a Monday, it's 1 hour after that due date. For homeworks, Nearpods, anything else that doesn't use doesn't use Proctorio, you have immediate ability to go back and look at your answers and see your scores. So what is my role? So you're going to be doing lots of work. I will log on to Canvas every day. I send emails. I send announcements. I obviously grade. If I feel like you're struggling a little bit, I will send you an email personally. I will comment on your discussion boards and your lab photos. So I basically am monitoring to make sure you're on track, and I'm here if you have any questions. If you've not taken an online course before, you may want to read this paragraph. There's a misconception sometimes that online classes are easier than face-to-face, which is not always the case. If you've taken online classes in the past that are not science-based, this is a little more intense. So in a traditional class, students are meeting in lecture 3 hours a week and in lab 2 hours a week. So you're going to be spending about that same amount of time just learning the content. That's not including the time to study, the time to do the assignments. So this is a course that's going to be pretty heavy as far as time commitment. So I would not be taking 20 hours and working a full-time job. This class is going to be a little overwhelming if that is the case. I will also say the first several weeks are the hardest until you kind of get into the groove. So just be patient, try not to get overwhelmed, contact me, we'll work through any questions you have. And then it gets easier kind of once you get the pattern down. So as far as, since this is an online class, some tidbits as far as technical problems. You have to use your ICC email. Tablets, Chromebooks, cell phones, gaming systems are not compatible or going to be sufficient to complete this course. You need either a laptop or a computer, like a desktop computer. Again, Chromebooks won't work with all these assignments. Here are all the resources that you have if you're having technical issues. Remember, I am a biologist. I have a master's in biology. I have a bachelor's in biology. I am not a computer technician. So if you have technical issues, I'm going to redirect you to this page. Here are the things that I'm going to recommend that you do. Clear your browser history. Clear your cookies and cache. Try a different browser. Edge or Chrome are the two best. Use the Canvas website, not the Canvas app. Sometimes just restarting your computer and kind of clearing out all the junk, so to speak, works. Make sure you have the correct email address that you're logging in with. And if you've used something called HonorLock in the past, it will not work with Proctorio. So you have to use two different browsers, one for HonorLock and one for Proctorio. If you don't know what HonorLock is, just ignore that. So here's the slide or the page that I said that's going to go through all the different types of assignments. So I'm going to do this somewhat briefly. Nearpod as the most similar you're going to get as if you're sitting physically in a classroom with me. So Nearpod is where the content of the course is. You have to get 100% participation or completion to get all of your points. And you can go back into the Nearpod and it will actually say like 50% completed or 75% completed. And if you've not gotten to 100, then you need to go back and make sure you didn't skip something. And you can go back in before the due date to make sure you've completed all those Nearpod questions. Any missed answer, so I will grade them for accuracy also, is minus point one. And as I mentioned, you have the ability to go back and change your answers, which is why you should always get full credit. Nearpods are available at least 1 day before the due date, or 1 week before the due date. And I'm just going to kind of do the first two together because they're both due on Wednesdays for this particular semester. So homework and smart books are both additional resources that help you learn the material or kind of practice the concepts. Smart books I will only use for Unit 1 for grading purposes, but they will be available for practice for Units 2, 3, and 4. So all the lecture material, so the Nearpod Smart Book for the first unit and homework are due on Wednesdays at 11:59. None of these are timed, so you can start and stop them. For the Nearpod, you must start and stop using the same computer and the same browser for it to save your progress. For all of those, you also have unlimited attempts, so you can go back and do them as many times as you want, and you're going to find these assignments on Canvas. The Nearpods are 5 points per chapter. The homeworks are 3 points per chapter, and for Unit 1, those smart books are 3 points per chapter. Again, the smart books are available for Units 2 through 4, but just as practice if you would like to use them, and they're not graded for Units 2, 3, and 4. The lab portion of the course, which is the lab photos and the virtual labs, those are going to be due on Fridays at 11:59. And again, they're available ahead of time. So the lab photos you're going to submit on Canvas, and the virtual labs are going to be on Connect. Again, not timed, unlimited attempts, and those are going to be almost every lesson. There's a few lessons that there is not a virtual lab, instead it's a Nearpod. That's a lab Nearpod, and those are 3 points per virtual lab. The lab photos are 1 point per photo, and remember, to get all of your points, you have to have all the parts that we ask for, which I'll explain in the lab video. And if you don't submit your lab photos, your lesson quiz becomes a 0. So that can add up pretty quick if you don't submit those lab photos, because this is a lab course, not just a lecture course. So every week you have a lesson quiz that is going to be due on Mondays at 11:59. So it gives you the weekend to kind of study the material. The lesson quizzes are lab and lecture, so 10 points from lab, or 10 questions and 10 points, and 10 points from lecture. And they're due on Mondays, 20 questions, 20 minutes, 1 attempt. The lowest lesson quiz will be dropped at the end of the semester, and they're going to be only open for a week ahead of time. So in other words, you can't work too far ahead. It should be noted that for all of these assignments, you don't have to wait until the due date. So if you know coming up that you're going to be out of town or you have a really busy week, then do them ahead of time. So all of these are going to be available for a minimum of a week before the due date. So, you don't have to wait till Wednesdays to do the lecture material and the Fridays to do the lab material. You can do them anytime during the week. It is due by these due dates. So we do have exams. For the majority, they are due on Tuesdays. There's a few exceptions to that rule. They are 75 questions, just lecture, 80 minutes, 1 attempt, and 100 points. The final is 150 points, 100 questions, and you have a little bit more time for that final exam. All exams are graded. There are no drop exams. All right, so you're probably getting a little freaked out, like there's a whole lot to this class. And again, there is, but I promise once you get into the groove, it gets better. So here's a little checklist of kind of how to get started. Look on Canvas, make sure you have all working materials, the lab kit, your ICC email is working, etc. Look around the Canvas and Connect sites. You're going to go to where this says start here and start reading the materials. And this is a list of how I suggest that you are going to complete the assignment. So you're going to want to do the Nearpod first. That's where the core content is in that Nearpod. And then start to do the practice activities and the homeworks. There's also something called Kahoots in each Canvas module, which are just practice like flashcards. So those are helpful. And there'll be study guides available for practice. Again, they're not graded, for each unit also. So there's all kinds of resources to help you. So you're going to study, and then you're going to take your quizzes and exams. And I recommend that you actually log into your email and to the Canvas site every day, because occasionally there's slight things that, crop up that don't work. There's a glitch or something that we needed to change. So just make sure that you're checking in on a regular basis. So the last few pages, and I'm not going to go through all of them, is the most important part as far as keeping track of your life. And this is the schedule. So I've got the week, the chapter section or name, depending on, some weeks we have different chapters, some weeks it's just different sections. And then the breakdown of each due date, the assignments, and a place for you to record your points. So as you go through here, this is going to be your guide of what is due when. The first week only, because we have some orientation material, there is assignments due for lecture and lab on Sundays. After that, Wednesday's lecture, Friday's lab, Monday's the quiz. Again, you don't have to wait until the last day of the week, meaning you can do them early. In fact, I encourage you to do them early. Sometimes students get a little frustrated because it's like, well, the exams are on Tuesdays and I just took the quiz on a Monday. This is true, because I have to kind of keep the flow going, but you can do things early so that you're not kind of stacked back to back to back. There's a couple discussion boards just at the beginning of the semester. There may be one more in the middle, but pretty much a max of 2 discussion boards for the entire semester. As we go through here, there's all the points are listed. There's a place for you to record your points. We've got exams, listed when they open and their due dates. A few other things to note, things like the refund date, which we saw on the previous page, the last day to withdraw with a W, and then a few little things at the end. The dates are slightly different at the end just because of the way the semester works out. Then we've got exam 4, which is not the final. And then several days later is that final exam, and then the total points. So hopefully that was helpful on how the course is going to work. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me.